I'm on a quest to uncover the secrets to crafting the perfect SaaS website. In each episode, I talk with product marketing professionals, sharing their hot takes on the future of B2B websites, as well as tactical breakdowns on how to understand your customers and activate buyers faster. Today, I'm joined by Alicia, a marketer with over 10 years of experience, previously the head of B2B product marketing at Deliveroo, and now the head of marketing at Ravio. In this episode, we discuss website messaging with Alicia running us through a case study of her time at Deliveroo and sharing some useful frameworks to help you create better and differentiated messaging that is going to capture the attention of your ideal customers. Let's jump in. Okay, Alicia, let's talk messaging. So I know you wanted to walk through a presentation. Let's crack on.
Cool. I know what everyone loves slides, but hopefully they'll be useful and we'll go through some examples. So I will start very briefly with a pop quiz, although I know this is an audience. How would we describe our value proposition? We usually talk about the technology that we've built or what it can do, but there's actually only one answer, which is who is it for and who are you talking to? The way that you describe your value proposition is highly unlikely to match the way that your ideal buyers would describe it. And our job as product marketers, as growth marketers, anyone who is building customer facing content and messaging is to speak their language first. Faster growth, accelerated sales cycles, building a pipeline, building momentum, it all comes down to positioning yourself correctly in the right competitive landscape and then messaging in the language of your customer. We won't talk about how to get uncomfortably narrow, how to identify the right customers, or even how to build positioning in this presentation. This is more focused on how do we then create a deliverable that speaks the language of your customer. And I'll talk through an example of how I did that at Deliveroo. Last kind of theory piece here. This isn't just about messaging on your website, and it's not just about messaging in your sales deck. Messaging needs to be a consistent thread that is woven through every single component of your business. The input metrics that funnel through, what you've built and what it does are interviews with customers, non-customers, people who you've lost in a deal cycle, product feedback, competitive landscape analysis, market research, and also your own internal assumptions and intuition. And then that all flows out and affects your messaging and your priorities across these different areas, from how to build qualified buyer personas organized by pain points versus job titles alone, what you choose to prioritize and how deep you go in different areas of your roadmap, the messaging on your website and sales deck, yes, and that's really where your kind of messaging might live and iterate. But it has to be woven through all these different pieces, from your customer support experience to every touch point has to have this kind of so what component of your messaging. So I'll just quickly talk through an example of how I did this at Deliveroo. I joined Deliveroo back in 2018 and I launched an ad platform in like my second week there, which was no pressure at all. And there was a lot of momentum and expectation and pressure around this project. It was expected to be a huge growth driver for the business. But what I noticed as well is that there was a lot of kind of commentary and concerns around the business that it was going to be bad for restaurants. Restaurants didn't want this. Why did we choose to prioritize building, a discount offer for restaurants? They don't want that. Um, and a lot of that is because no one understood what it was or who it was for. So my job as a product marketer was to take this piece of technology and position it and message it to the right types of restaurants with the right mindset who actually wanted to see value out of it so they could create their own promotions and discounts for consumers. And this is, in a nutshell, how you build messaging. You start with the product. So for Deliveroo, it was an MVP product of an ad platform that was discount-only offers. I cannot tell you how much negative concern there was across 12 global markets coming at me a week into this job saying this is going to fail, but also then pressure from senior leadership for this to be a monumental, almost like a new business unit, like a new growth driver for Deliveroo. And there were also a lot of internal assumptions about who it was best fit for. We want KFC, we want McDonald's, we want Nando's, as just generic examples of restaurants that can make this really successful for us. And all of that was looking at messaging the ad platform in terms of our best interests and not in terms of the right types of restaurants that would actually value this tool. So I went out to talk to restaurants of all these different shapes and sizes, from small mom and pops on the high street to talking to massive group chains in Dubai and in Italy and in Singapore, and just trying to understand. And there was this really obvious reality, which is margins for restaurants are so incredibly thin, whether you're a massive conglomerate or a small mom and pop. I talked to one restaurant where they're making choices on a weekly basis about whether they stock ketchup or mustard because they couldn't afford both. Similarly, like on the other end of the spectrum, there's huge financial concerns, and this was all pre-inflation and pre-COVID. Um, so the reality is that margins are razor thin, and we're saying, "Hey, here's a discount offer mechanic." So already I have objections and the lack of understanding of the value of this product, and I haven't connected the product to what's matching them in their world and their reality. So the objection that I needed to consider in my messaging is that growth is not the number one focus for every restaurant. Some restaurants don't want to double their site count or don't want to expand into a new market. They're just trying to get by. So that allowed me to then narrow my audience to focus on growth-minded restaurants at any size of scale. I could be more agnostic on the scales piece, but it was any restaurant that was interested in growth. So I went from talking about this, um, I can't remember the exact language, but it was this really technical, like a uh, offer. I can't remember, but it was all jargon. It was just a jargon pile. And I was able to position that as a way to grow your business and attract new loyal customers and transform the way that you're engaging with your customers online. And I started to see some resonance with that. And I started to see restaurants engaging with the tool. And so that allowed me to then build a whole go-to-market strategy just talking to this segment. I had 100,000 restaurant partners in the portfolio. I cannot do a big blue ocean approach to messaging to all of them. I had to find the right audience, find out what they care about, find out what they're scared about, and then connect them to that value. And that worked. So this was to the left of the line, the 2019 line was our launch period where we launched the ad platform across 12 different markets. I didn't know if I'd survive it, but I did. And then when I actually launched a go-to-market strategy that just focused on this growth message for a particular cohort, we were able to grow from 200,000 orders to 3 million incremental consumer orders over the first 16 months, and then a million incremental orders over the first 18 months, resulting in, I think by the end of the first 18 months, it was about 10% of global order volume was attributed to a marketer offer. So it's a story that by narrowing down to your best fit customer, speaking their language, getting ahead of their objections, you can find a way to speed up that path to growth.
Cool story. Yeah. So I think obviously research is like a huge part of this. What we covered in episode one, we covered jobs to be done research. What would you say are some sort of common mistakes you see that either founders or anyone within a company, anyone who's sort of involved in the messaging process, what would you say are some common mistakes that they make?
Yeah, number one is talking at the wrong altitude and talking about features. When I talk about altitude, Emma Stratton talks a lot about this as well, and certainly me and my co-founder James Domenpipe have experienced this in many different consulting projects over the years. Everyone speaks at the lowest altitude, which means you're talking about what it does. And certainly that's a component of messaging, but it leaves way too much room for so what? Why should I care? If you think about your buyer, like they are not thinking about your problem or your product as much as you are. They've got probably a stack of problems that they're solving. So your job isn't just to sell your solution, it's to sell why this matters and why you should solve it now. So there's an urgency component. If I go to any B2B SaaS website, I would bet 8 out of 10 their websites are just talking about what they do. They're not elevating it to that right altitude. So it talks about why this matters. Similarly, and actually a huge mistake that me and James made back at Kayako, which is a customer service platform, we worked together back in 2016 to 2018 is we got it wrong the opposite direction. We went way too aspirational in our messaging when we were launching. So we had this on-premise customer support software solution that was really successful and very profitable. We built a SaaS version of the tool, which actually meant we fundamentally changed our target champion buyer from this very technical kind of IT-focused persona to a more modern customer service, customer success manager. Different needs, different positioning, but we were way too high in the sky, way too aspirational with our messaging that was like, why this matters and what's all good in the world. That was way too detached from what you actually get and why and what it does for you and how it connects to your jobs to be done. Uh, Luckily, we were able to turn that around. Through aggressive customer research and market research and repositioning and remessaging. But you can avoid those mistakes by getting the right altitude right.
Nice. Yeah, I haven't. I like the concept of altitude. What are your thoughts on? So the way I try, the frame in which I try to think about this, and credit to the guys at Fletch PMM for this, is through capability messaging. So the feature is like a technical aspect of your product. A capability is essentially what your product does, like the functional element of it, like the
Yeah.
steps or the action that somebody takes inside the product. And then I think if you pair that with an implication, so what, perform this action so that you can
Yeah.
achieve the outcome or achieve some kind of benefit. Do you think that's a good sort of meet in the middle of altitude, or are there sort of other ways you think about that?
Big yes, absolutely. And that's really similar to Emma Stratton's VBF framework that I've unknowingly practiced for years as well. VBF is value benefit feature. And that
Okay.
actually is this template that I can show you in just a second, created by Mick
Yeah.
Pono, which is, first of all, the hard work is understanding what your customer values. What is value?
Yeah.
That's a whole exercise to figure out. And then our job as marketers, as product marketers, is to connect. Okay, this is the value they need to achieve. These are the benefits of achieving that value, and here's the exact features that will allow you to complete that. That
Mm,
is in our product marketing course, GTM Playbook, we call it a value nugget.
okay.
Don't know where that came from. I don't know, but
Yeah.
Emma calls it the VBF framework. The Fletch guys call it capability messaging. It's all kind of the same thing. It's a formula, and there's
Yeah.
a connection. And I think the going back to your original question, most founders, founder-led messaging especially, is just that bottom component. It's not that complete holistic
Yeah.
packaging.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, let's jump into the resource, and perhaps this is going to answer my question, but this, and I feel terrible that I'm not familiar with this VBF, value benefit feature.
Right.
Is that like is that a framework for which you communicate product capabilities, or and so you
Yeah.
start with the okay, all right,
Yeah, it's exactly what you just described, where you're saying, "This is my end outcome so that I can do this by doing this." So it just
okay,
kind of you can kind of piece together a sentence, basically.
yeah,
It's an exercise for building messaging, because I think and I'm certainly, have experienced this myself, but building messaging is quite hard because you're not only trying to balance everything you've learned from your customer interviews, but you often have a whole committee of people around you putting pressure on you to use specific language that we think is on brand. I have a whole list of words that I try to never use, like next generation, better. I hate seeing the word better in messaging because
mm,
it's often a crutch for the absence of understanding of what better looks like. Usually, on the other side of better is an articulation of value,
yeah,
but we haven't figured it out yet.
mm,
So yeah, and I have certainly fallen victim to, messaging by committee as well. It can be a really difficult thing to hold true to conviction of like, this is what customers care about. This is what the way we're talking in very plain language without all the jargon. So I empathize with everyone. Anyway, this is a framework from Mick Pono. Did not create this, but I have used this since 2016, 2015, and it's absolutely brilliant. We give it to all of our students in GTM Playbook, and I use it all the time myself. And this is all you need. And I think we're hearing this is being kind of recreated in all these different formulas and versions, but this to me is everything. You need top-line messaging that is a quick summary of your value prop. You can kind of think about this as your elevator pitch, an overview of your benefits, listing them out 1, 2, 3, a positioning statement, which I have feelings about positioning statements. I think they're a little bit outdated, although they do have a purpose. And then what you get. And then we go down here into your target customer section. So this top section is quite agnostic and maybe needs to encompass all of your champion buyers, all of your buyer personas, including your champion, even people who are, I call them like anti-personas, or I think other people call them, uh, I can't remember the term. Someone else used something on LinkedIn, but someone who could potentially thwart your deal,
Yeah.
and also the budget holder. You want to list out all of your different personas here. And then we go down into your value messaging section. And this is effectively an old school version of the VBF framework or capabilities messaging, which is your value statement, the bullets that bring that to life, and then what your product actually does, and then some proof points. And so I've used this back from Deliveroo, launching both the B2B and the B2C propositions. I use it at early stage 0 to 1 startup, and I use it at Ravio as well. And you can have, as many value statements and pillars as you want. I try to keep it to 3, because what this is kind of the blueprint for your messaging. This is all very internal, but it's much easier to organize your elevator pitch, your sales narrative, your website messaging. Any collateral kind of comes out of this particular document.
Yeah, good stuff. This is super interesting.
Yeah, it's great.
Cool. Okay. Does it scroll deeper? It looks like it goes
Right.
further.
No, that's kind of it. I wonder if I have a filled out version. I don't know if I have a filled out version that I could share.
No
Um,
worries if not. Um, did you want to then show the I think he was going to show the website example.
yes. So let's say in this target customer section, you have 2 different champion buyers, which is quite common. In an ideal world, I don't know if I've ever actually experienced this, but in an ideal world, your founder and your leadership team are bullish on one particular niche in the market. They see an underserved need, they're going after that. There's one champion buyer, you know exactly who you're talking to, you're good to go. The reality is that that's not often the case. So, you would have both those champion buyers here. But at Ravio, I recently, well, about a year ago, redid all of our messaging, and I'm going through a positioning refactoring process right now, so this will all be refreshed really soon. Um, but I just wanna show you how I use that template and kind of brought it to life here on the website. So here, this is kind of that so what. One thing I wanted to mention, one other resource I can share is the B2B elements of value. It's a resource out of Bain, and it shows you. Actually, do you mind if I just pull it up? Sorry, my
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's do it.
B2B. So this is also one of my favorite resources. This is the B2B elements of value from Bain. And this effectively summarizes all the different ways that B2B buyers perceive value. Most companies, as I talked about the right altitude for messaging, are communicating down here. Let me see if I can get a little closer. In the ease of doing business value. They're talking about time savings, reduced effort, cost savings, opportunity for increased, top line growth, and so on. But that leaves way too much room for the buyer to be like, so what? Why should I care about this right now? There's no urgency here. It's not to say this isn't an important component of your messaging. These are important components to include, but it shouldn't be the end all be all. Wherever possible, some of the best messaging will work its way up the pyramid into personal aspirational value. And that not, every single startup is going to be selling vision, hope, and social responsibility. But the more you can do to make a buying process and a sales narrative feel personal to the buyer, help them see what's in it for me, you're going to accelerate your sales cycle. Very common components here are reputational assurance, reduced anxiety, um, design and aesthetics are very important as well. These are all things that help me see what's in it for me. And that's a really important component to have in a sales narrative if you're trying to speed things up in your sales cycle. It also just kind of gets into that, like, what is aspirational? what is aspirational value beyond, time savings and that more fundamental components. And so when I was building Ravio's messaging, I went out and did about 20 interviews with different customers. I talked to people ranging from complete compensation novices, and I should mention Ravio is a B2B platform that's helping to um, connect compensation professionals to global kind of real-time benchmarking and also a suite of tools to manage compensation at scale. So Ravio has two different champion buyers. And when I went out and interviewed folks ranging from complete novices all the way through to compensation experts, I noticed that there was something that kept coming up, which is people are putting their own reputations on the line when they are uh, sharing a benchmark with their CEO, when they are putting an offer out to a candidate that they really need to win. And compensation, when you don't have data that you can trust, it feels really painful and really personal because this is a really emotional topic. What people get paid is a really personal thing. And so I kept hearing this concept of confidence coming up in interviews. People saying, um, I need to stand behind the data if I'm going to justify it to my CFO. I don't want to get overridden by someone else's opinion. It's frustrating when hiring managers don't trust the data or challenge it. And they need to have confidence themselves if they're gonna be kind of facilitating compensation decisions across a business. So that's helped me get that right altitude. What we do is total reward benchmarking, market trends, compensation management, but I wanted to capture some of that mindset piece, and that's why what we stand for, and the aspirational value that we're delivering that's shared across my champion buyers is bringing confidence to compensation. Here you can see I'm doing that classic piece of, here's what we stand for, here's who we're for. Trust is that kind of mindset piece as well, and then here's what we do. So this should give you all the components to help qualify a prospect. But then you might notice as we scroll down, we have a problem statement that speaks to both a comp novice and a comp expert. We have a few pieces where I'm trying to kind of mitigate our objections. But what you might notice here is that we have different solutions pages. And this is where it's really good to split out your positioning for your specific champion buyers. So for a compensation novice, more likely a people or HR person where comp is one of a million things that they're doing and they don't have the domain knowledge or the expertise to do it really well or to even give a lot of time to it. And we have to acknowledge that we're not the top thing that they're thinking about. In fact, it's a good thing. We should be able to get it off of their plate because they're like, oh, I'm using Ravio. It's sorted. I can focus on the million other things I'm worried about. So the messaging I have here is compensation managed. Managing compensation with confidence with instant access to reliable real-time benchmarks all in one place. And this is from that champion persona. Ravio brings credibility to every pay decision, even for the most nervous of managers. Like there's no next generation, there's no
Mm.
any sort of technical jargon. I can assure you there is plenty of technical jargon in the compensation space. It's quite a technical field, but this has to feel easy, fast. We're your partner in compensation. We're gonna help you through this, which is pretty different from how we communicate for our comp experts, where they want to get underneath the hood of compensation. And when I say one of the questions that I ask in my interviews with customers, and I'll be sure to share the interview guide with you, is if you've had the worst day in the world and you want to throw your laptop out the window, what has happened during that day? And they have usually described something along the lines of, I got overridden by my CEO because they didn't trust the data. I need data confidence. Data confidence, data confidence, data confidence. It kept coming up. And so there is both confidence on a reputational level, but then there's data confidence almost on a statistical level, which is, you know, this data needs to be reliable enough to be powering compensation for our employees and the next group of people we bring into the business. So I'm using a little bit of a buzzword here that I need to stamp out, which is best in class. I don't think that I should be using that, but um, all the way that we position the problems are different. The problem for a compensation expert who has been living and breathing in traditional old world solutions for their entire career is going to be totally different than the problem statement of someone who has never seen a traditional static salary survey in their life. So we have different problem statements, we have different value pillars. These are the pillars that I talk through on that worksheet. Every decision made easy, monitor compensation automatically, explain the why. So we're trying to be your partner. Whereas on the comp expert page, it's all about going under the hood and going into way more detail and kind of taking your already higher baseline to the next level.
Nice. Yeah, this is good. Because I think we'll have the audience will be ranging in, sort of experience when it comes to product marketing. So, even like, for example, I speak and work with people who sort of don't understand what a champion is, what a champion persona is. Like, how did you decide who to speak to on the homepage versus what to have on like the secondary solution pages?
Yes. So in that initial template where there's the overarching messaging of your value prop and your benefits, and that's kind of like the top of the messaging house, to use an old school term. And then I kind of break it down to value pillars. Your homepage is almost the cover sheet. So you're kind of speaking to both. And this is why I organize my champion buyers by a common denominator of pain versus their job title specifically. And what I mean by that is whether you are a total comp novice and you've never, touched comp before in your life, or you've been doing this for 20 years, they actually, what we learned is they have the same jobs to be done. They're trying to attract and retain the best talent to grow their business. They're trying to navigate um, building a leveling framework and getting their bands right to make sure people are paid fairly. There's very similar jobs to be done. So your homepage speaks to that higher level of value. And then the solutions pages are those specific deep dives of like what is particular to that champion. And I was able to identify those champion buyers by doing about 10 to 20 interviews. People often ask like how many interviews do you need to do before you have a qualified buyer persona? I generally find you'll start to see trends coming out after like 10 interviews. You start to see people are kind of saying the same things. Um, and then you do an exercise called pain mapping, where you take the transcripts of all of those interviews and pull out different themes and map them by their pains, gains, aspirations, and triggers. And you'll start to see there's trends that group people by their pain points. And so the common denominators of pain for our two champion buyers are comp is one of a million things I need to do, and I'm losing talent, and have high attrition, and I don't know what I'm doing. That's kind of our people generalist, and then we have the comp expert where they are being held back by old school solutions, by salary surveys. So in one side we're competing with doing nothing, and the other side we're competing with the old world traditionals generally, and they're trying to kind of achieve a more sophisticated, kind of take to the next level set of comp practices. So, that all came out of, yeah, doing about 20 interviews.
Nice. I like that this has been like a bit of a peek under the hood because it's it's sophisticated stuff. Like I said, we're probably going to have like a broad audience who watches this. Some have in-house product marketing expertise. Maybe they're a product marketer themselves. I think we'll also have an audience that's trying to go from like 0 to 1. And I'm not sure if I think you work with companies who are going like 0 to 1 as well. But sometimes, I think more often than not, how a lot of startups approach messaging is actually they just start on the website. They just start writing copies, random headline variations. And I like how this peek under the hood has like showed just how sophisticated this is, how you're thinking about. At the end of the day, it's words on a screen, it's pixels, but the process to get there is painstaking. It's a lot of research. It's a lot about understanding the customer and understanding the patterns. And I think this is like a good reality check of what it takes to create good messaging. Um, a lot of moving parts, what you talked about, like I think you call it pain or problem mapping.
Yep.
With everything that's gone on in the world over the last 1 to 2 years, sort of advancements in tech, are you use any specific tools or workflows to make this easier? Because you know, when you're having dozens of interviews, it's a lot of information. Is there any tactics or tools you're using there just to speed that up?
I have a really, really basic Miro board, and I might have, yeah, we're thinking about some startup ideas on this.
Okay.
But for me, it is quite painstaking, and to be honest, I hate this part of the interview process. However, I do find it's quite formative and, like, for me building my confidence and understanding the qualify I'm still in the as a human, I'm still making the decision on, like, seeing the trends, I suppose. So, certainly I use Grain or Gong to, record the calls, and that pulls the transcripts. I'll clip things that were memorable, and then I'll kind of pull all those transcripts out and try and identify themes. That's one component. You can absolutely use ChatGPT to do all that stuff. But I often find, unfortunately, that I get a better result keeping that actual raw data and kind of, like, doing it quite manually, which I know is not a very, like, sexy answer. But,
Yeah, no,
um, it generally pays off because I think too much gets diluted when it gets processed by any sort of kind of AI tool, and it's usually those raw tidbits that are the most memorable, like someone saying, um "Oh my god, this is a gold mine. Finally, I can go justify myself to my CEO." That has stuck me that was 2 years ago, and that has stuck in my head, and so it's those little tidbits that I think make messaging feel really human, and bringing those as much forward into your website, which sometimes can feel counterintuitive, and I don't quite know why. Like, sometimes we have an aversion in tech to using just plain language.
mm,
Maybe it feels too simple or too pedestrian or something, but at the end of the day, we're selling to humans.
mm.
We're all time poor, we're all pretty tired, and we can't we're like, no one's like, "Oh, I can't wait to learn about, like, this B2B tool and invest, like, a half of my day into evaluating this." No, we have seconds to work with, so we have to speak human language if we wanna speed up sales cycles.
Nice. I like it. I think with, I mean, LLMs or AI, yeah, various tech being hot topics at the moment, it's easy to get FOMO and use them. But I like how you're sticking to test and tried methods. As long as you get the outcome you want, I can relate to how sometimes an LLM like ChatGPT or Claude, whatever you use, will oversimplify things. And particularly when it comes to messaging, I've found as well, I call this like message mining, where you're kind of mining for those golden nuggets. And sometimes it really is just those one or two words, those offhand comments that people make
You're right.
that just accurately describe the problem you're solving, or how they would describe your product to their friend or whatever. So I can totally relate to like keeping it raw rather than these
100%.
LLMs oversimplifying things.
100%, and one thing that I have absolutely loved and cherished about Ravio is that, I've worked in environments where there's not as much reverence for those little tidbits or consideration for who we're selling to, and at Ravio, we have that. It's almost like a cultural mindset. So, we had a last onsite a couple, months ago, and we brought in a champion buyer from one of our big customers to just talk to us about her day and, like, the problems she has and what she sees for the future and just get closer to her world. And I had multiple people from the CEO down to AEs and people in engineering slacking me little tidbits that she was saying, "Oh, that was really good. Oh, that was good." And we bring them straight into our website because there's no better messaging to be crafted than what your customers are actually saying. So the more we can do to just keep it human and use human language, like, it's just yeah, it's way better.
Sweet, 100%. No further comments to be added to that. And was there anything else you'd like to show, or should we wrap it there?
Um, no, that's cool. I'll send you as well my interview guide, where it's intended to help you not, ask for direct feedback on what do you think of my product. It's to distill value and understand what's going on in your world, and that's how I've been able to uncover a lot of insights about what's how do I meet your buyer where you are. So I'll send you that interview guide, and then I can also send you my quite rudimentary pain mapping uh, template as well. Oosh, did my internet break up?
No, still got you. Yeah, it sounds good. Lots of resources to share. Sweet.
Totally
Okay. We'll leave it there then. Awesome.
nice.